something else I want to talk about is you talked a lot about hunting for fighters to compete in this debut show of UFC 1. Can you talk about some of the guys that you mentioned who you went after, including established guys like some of the K1 fighters you mentioned?
You know, I was interested in getting Perez, who had won a gold medal in the Barcelona Olympics. You know, he was a young guy that I felt would really showcase. He was a Olympic gold medalist. That was somebody who turned us down. I think he was under some pressure from the Taekwondo Association. I can't say that for sure, but it was my suspicion. I wanted to get Dennis Alexio, and I wanted to get Bart Vale. Bart had been a shoot fighter based out of Miami. He fought in Japan. Big guy, 6'3", 250. He turned me down. Same thing with Dennis Alexio. I couldn't keep Alexio on the phone for more than 2 minutes. And I tried to get him into that first show. Later tried to get him into UFC 5 in the super fight. Offered him $50,000. Turned me down. I wanted to get Peter Aerts, who is now starting to make a name for himself in K1 over in Japan. And anybody out of the Amsterdam gyms was of interest to me because I knew they fought Muay Thai style in Europe. So those two gyms, Tom Aerts and Johan Plaza's gym in Amsterdam, were the hotbeds for Muay Thai fighters, kick fighters in Europe. And both of them were both Peter Aerts and Ernesto Hus were priced a little too high. I eventually got Gerard Gordeau out of Johan Plaza's gym. But I was always trying to get somebody out of those gyms because the talent there was excellent. Better than anything I felt we had in America. We looked at Mitch Blood Green, who had 2 fights with Mike Tyson, one in the ring and one on the street corner of Harlem. We really couldn't afford him. He had gotten a $45,000 settlement for his brawl with Tyson in front of that clothing store in Harlem. That was more than he got paid when he fought Tyson in the ring. So we couldn't afford him. He wanted a $50,000 appearance fee, as I recall. I thought about Mark Gastineau, who started boxing in 91, and his career went on to, I believe, 95 or 96. He had been a Hall of Famer for the New York Jets in the NFL. Big guy, 6'5", 265. Really couldn't afford an appearance fee for him. I thought briefly about Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Menga, who I've heard was a real tough guy outside of the wrestling rings. So on. And of course the two dream fighters, and there was no way we could have afforded them or gotten them, was of course Alexander Karelyan, the experiment, the multiple Greco-Roman champion who won a gold medal in Barcelona from the Soviet Union, from Russia. And there was no way we could have gotten him out of Russia. He was a national hero and a national treasure. And I remember the Kowalski brothers in America who knew him said, Art, you have as good a chance of getting a Karelyan out of Russia as you do getting Mike Tyson out of that prison in Indiana. And of course, naturally, that was our other dream, candidate was there any way we could seduce Mike Tyson to doing this? At the time, though, he was serving a jail sentence, as you know.
Yep. I've heard, this is something we talked a lot about on the Old School MMA review show that I do with Zane Simon from BloodyElbow.com. And we talked a lot about Don the Dragon Wilson, who was one of the commentators for the early UFCs. And several times they did a question-and-answer session on the pay-per-views where Don would actually say he was looking forward to fighting in the octagon. And Blatnick had even mentioned a few times as well. Jeff Blatnick had mentioned that he might fight in the octagon. Do you recall talking to either Jeff Blatnick or Don Wilson about ever competing in the UFC?
Yeah, I really felt that Blatnick, and God bless him, God bless his soul, he's passed on, as you know, great guy. Blatnick, I think, just maybe like John McCarthy, it had passed his consciousness once or twice, but I don't think it was something he was about to shift gears on. He had moved on, in his life. He was a guy in a suit at that point. I think to go back and train and compete for this, I don't think it's something and the proof is he didn't do it. So, I can't speak for him, but I don't think he was particularly serious about that. Now, Wilson is an interesting case because I've known Don for years. We joke about it every time I see him. He always says to me, when are you finally going to get me a fight? He's still teasing me about the fact that he would have done it. He said, I would have liked to have fought Tank Abbott. That was his favorite. He wanted me to put him in with Abbott. The truth of the matter is that Don still is making a decent living, making videos of movies that go directly to Netflix and used to go directly to Blockbuster in the old days. But he makes a ton of them. And he's good at it, by the way. He's a great martial artist. But we could never come up with an agreement on price. Don would start at some figure that had a lot of zeros on it. I would say, Don, there's no way. You know, if we did something, it would be in this realm. And Don would joke of being, nothing ever came of it. So here's a classic case of two, you know, ways that I said in the book, you know, under the Gracie Challenge chapter 4, is getting a martial artist to fight another martial artist, very difficult to get him to agree to the money or the rules. In Wilson's case, it really wasn't the rules. He knew that they were carved in stone at that point, whatever we were doing. But the money became the factor. And the fact of it is, he didn't want to put his reputation, his credibility online unless there was enough money to make it worth his while. And I can respect that.
Okay, let me ask you one last question about celebrities who might have gotten involved in the UFC. And this one you do talk about in the book. Chuck Norris. Can you tell us about what happened with Chuck Norris and what the plan was for Chuck?
Well, quite frankly, Rorion Gracie had a relationship with Chuck, and in chapter 9 in the book, Is This Legal? The chapter is called Is This Legal? Because at one point we were trying to come up with another color commentator that would make a lot of sense. Campbell McLaren and I at Semfor were kicking around a lot of names: Ray Nitschke, Sam Huff, Charles Bronson, Ingemar Johansson. I mentioned this all in the book. There's a lot of people, and at one point I decided to talk to Rorion because I knew he had a relationship with Chuck. They had done some seminars together. Norris had brought the Gracies to some of his events to teach grappling, and he had made himself a trip to Brazil. He was, I believe at the time, he had a blue belt, and he and Rorion had this relationship. So I said, well, let's go over and talk to Chuck about it. So Rorion was kind of non-committal at first about it. I said, why? He said, well, there was kind of a dispute about money. And I described this in the book in chapter 9, that there was a seminar, and Chuck thought that he had worked out the numbers with Rorion, and Rorion thought it was for him and his brothers. And Chuck was clear that number that he quoted to Rorion was for Rorion. He wasn't hiring a whole troop of Gracies, not at that price. And Rorion thought that price was for every brother. So they wound up having a falling out, and I don't know what was said. Maybe even some words were exchanged. But Rorion was reticent to go out to Chuck's house in Tarzana until I said to Rorion, we really need to pitch it. So I typed up a whole bunch of pitch points on 2 index cards. And we drove over to Chuck's house. When we get there, Matthew, Rorion turns to me kind of nervous. He says, look, let me go in alone at first. Because I want to be able to, you know, kind of smooth this over. He and I need to talk. I understood. I said, okay. I said, as soon as you need me, come out and get me. I said, I'll come in until the close. I sat there looking at my index card, twiddling the card in my hands for about 25 minutes, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. Finally, another couple of minutes, Rorion comes out. And I said, what happened? He said, no matter what I kept saying to him on the card, he said, I worked through it just like you suggested. He said, all Chuck kept saying was, is this legal? Are you guys sure this is legal? And that was his whole response. So that's what became the title of the book. Chuck was asked to be a commentator at the first event and decided that it was a little too risky. He didn't want to come to the party.